Okay, so this video is the follow-up to another one I made covering the events of Fire Punch with obscene amounts of try-hard editing. So check out that first one if you haven't. For those that have... Last time on Agni's immolated incestuous escapades, our Promethean protagonist caught fire, charged some raiders, unwittingly indoctrinated an acolyte, met some Frenchmen, was rescued by the lost Wachowski sibling, became the Karate Kid, and set off with his new compatriots to burn down post-apocalyptic Dubai. And if that wasn't a good enough primer because he's tried to skip part 1 for some reason, then Catch all that? No? Good. Go watch the first one, please. I spent like 2 months on. Meanwhile, in the, power plant, Sun evangelizes the faith of the living, smoldering snuff film of a man that is Agni to a captive audience of fellow slaves, all of whom could really use literally any shred of meaning to hold on to in the face of the nightmare world brought about by the Ice Witch, who is, fun fact, not real. That's right, I have deceived you. This is not Frozen 3, but Ice Age 6. The one where Manny eats Sid and Scrat runs the clergy. Yes, there were 5 Ice Age movies. Truly, this is the darkest timeline. Only marginally better than the one where a city is held together by indentured servitude, lies, and chewing gum. Stranded in the middle of a dying world with no real hope of course correction nor any one entity to blame it on. Everyone is in danger of being snuffed out at any moment, except for the regeneration blessed who can only wish they were so lucky. With previous generations apparently taking tablets of super cyanide to end it all, confirming my suspicion that Fire Punch is indeed set in Canada. This of course includes Agni, whose only thought as he follows Togata to the bowels of Bayamdol the next day is how once he kills Doma he can finally let himself ascend to the big ranch in the sky. All he has to do is ignore the tortured wails of prisoners wearing away at his already shattered sense of self and oh boy. Hope you weren't expecting this arc to end with a straightforward face-off because things are about to get very, very messy. Like, thousands of innocent casualties leading to the start of a new religion based on cannibalism messy. My favorite part of Fire Punch is when Agni said it's fire punching time and fire punched all over those civilians. Now it may seem like I'm glossing over what is, by all accounts, the biggest fight in the series thus far, but one thing you need to understand about this series is that the fights themselves aren't really that important. And I realize that probably sounds weird considering Fire Punch, but honestly the title tells you pretty much everything you need to know about how most of the fights go, because Agni has exactly one combat strategy. Run towards the other guy until they're on fire. If they do not catch fire, hit them in the face until they are on fire. Hell, he doesn't even really need to punch them most of the time. They're dead the moment he makes contact. He just does that because he's mad. Sometimes we just skip the fights entirely because the author wanted to get to the more interesting stuff. Fights happen because in this world, conflict is constant and inevitable, but what happens in them is very rarely of much consequence beyond entertainment value. Okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but this isn't Hunter x Hunter is what I'm trying to say. The fights, more than anything, are a means to an end. The end in this case being the deaths of thousands in an effort to save hundreds. And the only reason the people he did manage to save don't immediately freeze to death is because of his followers, who are a bunch of blessed weirdos who heard about a walking Molotov barbecuing cops and thought that was so base they decided to start worshipping him, following the smoke trail all the way to the now burning Bayamdol with transport in tow. What follows is a vehicle chase, as the remnants of Bayamdol chase down the followers screaming about how they have the power of God and anime on their side. Followers that include a guy whose blessing is being an empath and also deflecting bullets somehow, Viken from Guilty Gear, and the progenitor to at least 3 different Chainsaw Man characters. Meanwhile, back in Bayamdol, Judah decides that now that the city she was obligated to protect is in cinders, there's no better time to partake in every Regen Blessed's favorite pastime. She tries to convince Agni to hit her with the old spicy keychain, but the conversation only serves to finally convince him that he was, in fact, coping. And the fact that the straw that broke the camel's back was her calling him Oni-chan cements that, in spite of all of his issues, Agni is still a more well-adjusted person than most anime fans. But right as Judah manages to get her turn on the Xbox, a stranger enters the scene, cuts her head off before it can catch fire, tells Agni she's the Ice Witch, and pieces out. And however you think that's gonna resolve, I guarantee you are wrong. More on that later. The author really likes movies, let's just say. Hours later, Agni trudges his way back to the settlement his little commune has hunkered down in after shaking off their tailgaters to find he's been crowned the head of a brand new faith. Apparently, tearing down an entire city to rescue a persecuted group inspires something of a fervor in people. The narrator wasn't lying, the freezing masses do be yearning for fire. So with no real resources and hundreds of feeble, dying followers, what's a newly minted cult leader to do? Agni's solution, evidently, is to go from Thaco to Waco and fall back on Old Reliable, having his good side lopped off repeatedly until there's enough for everyone, cause that went great the last time. Regardless, with his people sated by the Forbidden Communion wafers, the gang begins to settle into a groove. That is, until the Empath Blessed comes along and outs Togata as a trans man, enraged by how political they've made this wholesome commune. This immediately prompts him to leave, sending Agni into full-on panic mode as the only person he knows that seems to know anything about anything threatens to leave him to deal with his ridiculous problems alone. Fortunately, they're willing to stay if Agni does something cool, and the guy that ruined everything is apparently staying somewhere nearby. Wanna see me kill a guy? He does not end up killing the guy, instead having an in-depth conversation with him on the nature of education, the long-term implications of sustaining a community on human flesh, and the true nature of Beimdol's faith. This, however, is derailed when Togata realizes he's the one that torched their entire film collection and rips into him r/atheism style. Truly, in this moment, they are dysphoric. Ultimately, Agni decides to leave him be and just try to move forward with his life. Or at least, he'd like to. But turns out 8 years of keeping yourself alive solely through constant molding doesn't make for the kind of guy that can live and let live. Huh? Holy shit, Fujimoto, what in the... Well, after that waking nightmare, Agni's first and somewhat understandable instinct is to try and drown himself. Unfortunately for him, Togata seems to have called dibs on the Xbox this time around, burning to death as they pull him out of the water. Well, at least he still has the rest of the And here is where Fire Punch somehow goes even further off the rails than it already was. Like if it had slipped off the tracks before this point, it has now grown legs and begun scaling a 90-degree cliff face. There is technically a sequence of events that occurs from this point on that lead from one to another until the conclusion, but the rest of the story almost feels more like a stream of consciousness punctuated by the occasional bout of incest. New concepts are introduced without much explanation, and while there's still some compelling stuff there, I don't know how much value there is in going through it the same way I have the rest of this. And so for that reason, and also because I want to get this out before the rapture, the rest of this is gonna be a bit rapid fire. More so than usual. Alright, so. Turns out the lady claiming to be the Ice Witch is an ancient blessed named Sugma or something that plans to trap Judah in a giant tree that will drain the energy from all life on Earth to warm the world so the new humanity can make the next Star Wars movie. Yes, that is her actual stated endgame. Doing so will trap Judah in a perpetual state of semi-consciousness, essentially damning her to an organic iron lung for all eternity. Agni climbs the tree and punches her out of it, causing it to explode, with the blast getting rid of his flames and Judah's memory. Agni, being a consummate coper at this point, convinces Judah that she is in fact his little sister so he can maintain literally any reason to keep going. The two of them find a group of stragglers and end up living with them for the next 10 years, one of them being Doma's daughter, who asks him to kill the Fire Punch, which, to be fair, he does try. Good lord does he try, please stop trying. However, this domestic bliss is interrupted by the cult of Agniism, now 100 strong with Sun at the helm, kidnapping Judah to try the tree thing again. This, unsurprisingly, does not go over well with Agni, who is fortunately living in the same house as Doma's direct descendant, and is so able to don his body horror batsuit before going off to ruin everything. Sun takes all of this very well. You could say he really warms up to the idea of letting Judah go. In the conflict, however, Judah somehow ends up trading her amnesia over to Agni, and agrees to become the tree if the remaining cultists promise to keep him happy. Evidently, they seem to have, bonded during their time together. We then jump 80 years into the future, where the warming of the Earth is already fading and Agni is given a pill of super cyanide to end it all before the Wheat Wars leave him stranded in this world alone. John Harvey Kellogg XV is apparently a real ruthless bastard. And then we cut to Judah. Alone in the void, doomed to a perpetual limbo in service of warming a planet that will likely be bombed out in less than a century. As eons pass, the Earth decays and collapses to rubble beneath her while she remains, her consciousness eroded to atoms by time. I'm honestly still not sure how I feel about this ending. The entire second half of the series, when taken literally, is kind of a mess. But at a certain point, I feel like it's best to stop taking it as a story altogether. Because to me, Fire Punch isn't so much a narrative as it is an avenue for the author to scream his lungs out into the void with everything that entails. And whether that scream is one of defiance in the face of an uncaring universe, or one of anguish, where the cruelest thing you can do to another person is make them keep going. You can't deny that it is a sight to behold. A procession of noise, violence, rage, life, and death, over and over and over and over until, eventually, all that remains is oblivion. And incest.